Hello, welcome to Dissecting 20 Fantasy High, episode 4. Thank you so much for all of the support on the previous series, and I'm not gonna do too much of a takeaway today. I have sort of realized that the takeaways kind of balloon the episode time a little bit. You might not see it in the actual edit, but they take quite a bit of time, and Eden does a lot of work to cut them shorter. So instead, both for the takeaway and for some additional theorizing and talking to you guys, I'm going to start doing a pre-show. You will have possibly not seen the pre-show before this episode, and for all future episodes, I will put out the premiere ahead of time, and I will do a pre-show on the Saturday in the morning before the actual episode goes live. And there I'll talk about, my takeaway. I'll talk back and forth with chat about theories or things that I think, and, possible takes that I gave that you may or may not agree with. I would have loved to have some sort of pre-show after episode 2 to talk about that crazy combat. So that's what we're going to do from now on. Hopefully it'll help the actual episode time get a little bit shorter, more compact, more focused on the actual episode that this episode is about. And then we can have the pre-show to discuss the previous episode. So with that, I'll give a very short takeaway. I liked episode 3. I thought it was good. I thought it was a really good example of how to get your players through a lot of plot very quickly. Very good if you're looking at doing something like a one-shot or a limited series, which broadly all of Fantasy High has been that, but I think episode 3 especially did that really well. So with that, let's get into it. Episode 4, Street Race to the Death. And I actually, this is 100% true, was thinking about and using the advice from this takeaway during my last D&D session. My players had gotten called to a town meeting where I wanted to introduce about 3 different plot hooks, nearly 8 new important characters, and the pre-existing relationships and tensions of said characters. And something I've really taken away from Fantasy High is that when introducing a lot of information like that, it's best to do it quickly. If you take too long with each thing, it slows the pace way too much, and your players get worn out and just stop paying attention, or at least as much attention, before you're actually done delivering the information. Now, being concise and quick is not something I'm amazing at. The raw recording of this episode was nearly 4 hours long, so I used the sponsor of today's video, World Anvil, to help me out, specifically their plot articles. And if you're a player in my game, avert your eyes. There are spoilers on screen. Seriously. World Anvil's plot articles really helped me split the meeting into digestible chunks and got me thinking more about the things that were absolutely necessary to include in any given section versus the stuff that could get cut if things were slowing down too much. It also acted as a sort of hub while I was actually running the scene that I could use to quickly get to other articles when necessary. Like if they ask a specific question about a specific character, I could easily get to that character's article. Even this, though, is pretty light use of the plot article type. I was purely using it for organization, but it also has tons of great prompts to help spark your creativity during the actual writing process. If you're interested in trying it out for yourself, you can sign up for a free account today or use my code MEGAPHONE for 51% off any yearly subscription. I legitimately use World Anvil almost every day at this point, and I think it is well worth the money. Again, that is code MEGAPHONE for 51% off. Thanks to World Anvil, and let's get into the episode.
He reaches into her hand, takes out a crumpled piece of paper.
It says, Penny Johnny Crystal Palimpsest?
Deeper in the garage, there is a full dance studio.
I need to know more now.
You hear a voice coming from the garage. Save me.
Guys, we gotta go.
There is a crystal with the young girl putting her hands up against the outside of the crystal from the inside of it. You get the crystal in your hand, you grab the keys, there's a sick hot rod right there.
You guys want to go for a ride?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the tieflings says, Johnny, they're getting in your car! Johnny Spells goes, all right, gang, let's rumble. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fantasy High. Last we left our heroes, they were speeding down the highway in a stolen hot rod.
So rad.
So fucking rad. As you guys leap into the car and peel off, you guys see that the tiefling greasers rush to their motorcycles. You have a few seconds as Fig peels out of the garage parking lot to talk about what you're gonna do.
Go into a rage. And I throw a hand axe at the skull of that motorcycle.
At the skull of the motorcycle? Go ahead and throw.
All right, so that would just be so advance. Okay, so one. Okay, I got 18.
18. It's a dead-on hit, but it's very, very hard. So the skull surface, you go, whoo, clang, and you see a tiny crack appears, but it doesn't deal full damage. You get the sensation that this thing can be hit, but it will be very hard to deal damage to this.
Gotcha.
That's going to be Riz.
I think that sort of over-the-table notification, or not notification, but explanation from Brennan there is very good. Because I think resistance and vulnerability are some of the toughest things to, like, work in narratively, because there's a very fine line between how do you narratively describe resistance versus narratively describe a fuckload of health. Because narratively, they're basically the same thing. It's just that it's dependent on the damage source, right? Resistance, if they have resistance to all damage, unless there is a certain feature that specifically says that it overcomes resistance, that is effectively just doubling the thing's health, having resistance to everything. You know, magical, non-magical, whatever. So narratively, it's very hard to delineate between those two things. And so I like the kind of more over-the-table, sort of direct to the player. Hey, you get the sense that you can hit it, you can deal damage, just not a lot. I think that much more evokes what I assume is like a non-magical resistance than necessarily this thing has a lot of health or you shouldn't even try to hit it. I think it's a good way of communicating something like resistance, or maybe something like the toughness. I believe it's called toughness from Baldur's Gate 3, where you have to deal like a certain amount of damage over the threshold before it'll deal any amount of damage. I think those are very hard to communicate within the narrative and kind of need a bit of an over-the-table, like, hey, this is kind of what's going on. Because otherwise they might not get there.
That's going to be Adine.
I would like to cast as a non-ritual Identify on this crystal that I'm holding.
Rad. You cast Identify. Immediately, the crystal swirls around. You hear a voice saying, "Hello, Adine. It is I, the raw force of your arcane intellect, here to talk to you about the exciting things to discover about the nature of this crystal palimpsest."
Oh, I'm such a nerd.
The palimpsest is a form of dream crystal, an arcanotechnology used in acquisition.
Speed it up.
You will find that basically the crystal palimpsest is used for storing information. Now, most crystals, dream crystals, are monitored by the Council of Chosen.
Okay. So, the crystal with the girl in it is a crystal Fist. I didn't spell that right, but it's fine. Is it going to tell me how to spell it? Palimpsest. There we go. Dream crystals are normally monitored by the Council of the Chosen. I mean, I think this is not a crazy thing that I've discovered, but like the fact that it is specifically calling out that this is a dream crystal, I think is clearly drawing our attention to the dream crystals being installed in the school. Also, I will add a really fun way to use identify. I like this a lot compared to the normal just like reading out a stat block description, reading out, or even just handing the PCs a note card. I really like this kind of characterization of her magic. It reminds me of like characterizing a warlock's familiar or a ranger's beast pet, or artificer Battlemaster's forged pet. Like, this characterization of her magic that she can ostensibly have a limited conversation with, I think is really, really fun. I like it a lot. Having this intelligence that is telling you things rather than the almighty hand of the DM just handing you a sheet of information, I think really gives it some depth and gives it some interactability that I think will not only be more interesting for the character themselves or for the player themselves, but also gives you some flexibility as the DM. If you give them just a pre-written sheet, you know, you have exactly the flexibility that you had when you wrote that down. There's no way to sort of give them additional gradients of information based on player feedback without, you know, kind of disconnecting that from what the spell already gave them. You know, obviously you could add on, but that feels a little bit, you know, hand of the DM, whereas this feels much more natural. I think it hides the hand of the DM within sort of a magic trick a lot better. So I like the characterization of the identify a lot.
Just going the same speed you're going right now. You're going to hit the brakes, which is going to give you an advantage on steering, but it's going to slow you down, letting them catch up. Or you can move evasive, which slows you down, but gives the car a +5 to its AC.
Can I cruise but lay on the horn?
You may absolutely cruise, but lay on the horn. That is
Okay.
totally fine.
I'm gonna cruise but lay on the horn. But I still have an action and a bonus action,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. So I turn the radio up. It's Rainbow in the Dark. It's blaring. I look in the rearview mirror and I cast Sleep on
Oh my god!
all of this.
This is a 20-foot radius, yes?
Yeah, 20-foot radius.
I've heard Emily Axford say before that when she is thinking about how to play, she reads her spells and she thinks about what would be cool or what is something that I can do with this that would be cool in an action movie. And I will give some credit to Brennan. I think he puts her in situations. Like, this is a very action movie type of sequence. So I think that there is something to be said for he puts her in situations to where that is more available. But to give like most of the credit to Emily Axford, I think that this is something that is so cool, so inventive, and really, you know, I'm not someone that is like super hard on PCs really knowing their spells. That said, I think for any PC, if you want to get better at playing, if you want to be more like the players that you see on Fantasy High, Dimension 20 broadly, Critical Role, just read your abilities and pre-think of things to do with them, things that could be cool. And I think it's one of the things that I love about the shows that I do, whether it's Dissecting 20, Critical Eyes, watching these sorts of actual plays. if you're playing in a campaign right now, think about what would my character do in this situation? Like, look at your character sheet. I'm not joking. Look at your character sheet and look at the situation that these PCs are in and think about some things that you might do in this situation that are really cool. Thinking about it off table where there is less pressure and less like timing, less reactivity from you where you're having to like manage a lot in the moment. Thinking about all of that ahead of time is going to better prep your mind to think creatively in the moment. Not only might you have already pre-thought of some things that might work in this situation, but that process is going to more deeply familiarize you with your character sheet, with the options that you have, so that it's more natural for you to come up with cool stuff in the moment. There's not as much burden of just remembering the things that you can do. Since you already remember them like that, you're more able to focus a lot of your creative energy on what's an actually cool thing to do in this moment. I think that there's something to be said for like how you think about what you're going to do if you want to be like Emily. But there's also something to be said for like, she says that she looks at it beforehand, or she looks at her sheets and actively thinks about like, what not only what would work, but what would be cool. And if you have a solid DM, which I think many DMs are more solid than maybe players give them credit for, they will try to lean towards what might be cool. Rule of cool is a statement for a whole reason. And this is not even like her friend's cantrip where, you know, she's like kind of flexing the rules a little bit. This is totally just raw. And there's something to be said for her creativity here. But to give a little bit of a leaving compliment to Brennan, there's also something to be said for putting your characters into unique and novel combats. It's why I couldn't bring myself to be too harsh on the episode 2 combat, even though I think there's no excuse for 2 players dying in the first combat of the campaign. I also believe that DMs should take big swings if they want to put their players into cool and interesting and novel combats. Now, that's why I'm a proponent of fudging, because sometimes those cool novelties that encourage this type of thinking are also going to be majorly unbalanced, but putting them into this cool combat allows their creativity, like Emily Axford's creativity here, to really blossom.
5 times, that's how many hit points of people it puts to sleep.
Oh, I see. Okay. 2, 8, 11, 18, 22.
22 hit points worth of people. You see that this guy with the arrow in his neck and the guy with the crowbar right next to him, each fucking dip. Oh, mighty night. This guy fucking takes.
Does it hurt them because they fall off?
This guy
the
takes
bike?
all the way off into this bench and crashes into it. This guy is going to fly off the side of the road this way. Johnny's gonna have to make a dodge attempt to not get hit by the motorcycles going.
Love it. Love it. I was about to say, I think one of the big level ups you can do as a DM, which this is more possible when you've set up an interesting and novel combat. But one of the big level ups is thinking about the externalities, the second order effects of PC's actions in combat. Theoretically, this is just, you know, putting some people to sleep. I think the very natural, like, first order effect of that is they fall asleep, they're driving a vehicle, so it, you know, veers off the road. But I think what is going to make your players feel extra fucking cool and sick is if that has the second order effect of like, oh, because their thing is like veering all which way, some of the other people have to make dexterity saving throws or else they get affected. Either they slow down or they maybe get run off the road themselves. Like, having that domino effect is going to make your players feel so fucking cool in combat. That's like some of the coolest that a PC can feel is when they have that domino feeling. to their actions. And again, it's not easy to do in like a white room combat, which is my term for like a combat where it's just like the adversaries and the allies are just in a blank white room, no terrain, no features, nothing to interact with. It's just a box, say a 20-foot squared box of nothing. That's what I call a white room combat. It's hard to work in externalities into a white room combat outside of just exactly what the spell says. So, again, this is going to be my pitch, I guess, this episode for make wacky and weird and interesting combats. And be ready to get, I would say, a little fudgy on the back end because your weird and interesting combat might run away from you because it's, getting out of the kind of recommended or standard D&D that a lot of this stuff is balanced around. When you start making it wackier and weirder, it gets harder and harder to judge the balance of an encounter. So build in some switches that you can pull as a DM to suddenly make the combat easier or harder. That way you can kind of keep it interesting and challenging the whole way through. But the real benefit of doing that is this sort of thing where you can work in those second order effects, those dominoes that make the players feel so cool.
Johnny Spells pulls up alongside you. Make a dexterity saving throw, if you'd be so kind.
Dexterity saving throw. That's going to be 16.
You make your saving throw as you see a car coming through the other way, pulling out of the stoplight, full of a whole happy little halfling family.
Oh my god.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Involving third parties in a combat. Again, fantastic way to make the combat more interesting and an amazing example of what I mean when I say that making the combats more interesting and more novel is going to inherently unbalance them, because this is a morality check. I'm sure. I haven't even seen it yet, but involving third parties, especially innocents, collateral damage essentially, is a morality check on the party, because it is completely up to their personal moral opinion as to whether or not this makes the combat harder and how much harder it makes it. This is inherently something where, like, the balance of this combat, the difficulty of it, is now completely up to the players' opinions and, like, their determination of their party's morality. But also, it's so much more interesting and cool to make the players make that moral check in the middle of the combat. It's going to make them, I think, more personally invested because they are able to weigh out what is the value of our safety, our lives, the success of our mission versus these other potential moral questions. And I think this can also apply broadly to having like a third hostile faction, that is maybe like all three factions are hostile to each other. Maybe someone's neutral. Maybe the third faction can get flipped to either side, what have you. All of those things are going to make the combat more interesting, but they are also going to unbalance it. So keep that in mind as a DM and be prepared for the unbalance. But I think that this is really gonna make your combats better.
No, come back.
You can just re-roll it, right?
And 14. 17.
17 hits.
Woo!
Kill him.
There it is. 11? Yeah, 11.
11 damage?
Yeah.
This guy goes,
I will say, and I think this is, to an extent, it's a product of Fantasy High being a newer product and project, I think, than Critical Role. Although, frankly, not that much. Not that much of a later product. We're talking 2 or 3 years. I think that sometimes within Critical Role, there is this sort of kayfabe that they put up of, pretending that Matt really wants the monsters to win and, is so frustrated by the players. Because setting up that sort of, adversarial nature to the conflict can be fun. And that's why I call it kayfabe. For those of you who are unaware, kayfabe is the tacit agreement between professional wrestlers and their friends to pretend that overtly staged wrestling events, stories, characters, etc. are genuine. And that's why I use the term kayfabe when talking about Critical Role, is because I don't believe that they truly consider the nature of their relationship to be adversarial. I mean, in 5th edition, if it was truly adversarial, I don't know if I've talked about this during Fantasy High, but I will die on this fucking hill. If the DM wants to win in 5th edition, they just can. Like, I can follow all of the guidance in every published 5th edition book. I can make sure that the XP are within the correct bounds. I can absolutely follow every direction and guidance. And I can make like a medium combat that will guaranteed TPK my players. That's just how it is. This is not a war game. This is not, even not to use an example like that, this is not chess. Like, the DM and the players are not actually in a pitched competition that they are both trying to win. We are just pretending as if they are. And it is all done for the purpose of fun and storytelling and challenge and conflict and drama. And to that extent, the kayfabe can be useful in that. Pretending that as a DM you're so frustrated that the players are rolling so well, even though them winning is like ultimately what it's about. Or at least them gaining satisfaction from playing the game. Whether that satisfaction is, narrative, whether it's just fun, whether it's cathartic sadness. That is ultimately the goal of all of us at the table. Like I said, it's not to win. It's not chess. And so I understand when I see the kayfabe at Critical Role. But it does get a little much for me at times. There are times where I start to maybe not believe, or maybe believe that maybe a little bit of it isn't kayfabe. And so it's, I don't want to say necessarily refreshing, but it's nice to see a DM unabashedly be on the side of the players, which I would claim every DM should be. Because again, if you're not, you can just win. It's not that hard, frankly. Just look up the Shadow or the Intellect Devourer. You're good. You can kill all your players, trust me. So I get and respect the kayfabe nature of it. I do see the benefits. But I also think, especially at a table of new players that might not necessarily understand the kayfabe or might not be used to it, I think there's a lot of very legitimate benefits to being unabashedly happy for and excited for the players. And really like Brennan gives a big laugh and a clap when the players do something well and is like, ooh, cringing at the monsters doing well. Because ultimately he's on the side of the players. He's just facilitating the actions of the world to provide them with drama and challenge.
Ooh, what you want to do in a big bad sword fight? And you skewer him right through the head. Sword. You feel it crunching through like the keratin of his horns. Bam! It's this golden rat basket hill. Oh, daddy.
Oh, do not call me daddy.
My last words were daddy.
No, they weren't.
This should have you rethink your papa.
No, I'm not. I love my papa, all right?
He falls off. Bam, 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 gone.
Christ.
You see Gorga, that's going to be you.
Am I swinging distance to this guy?
Yeah. Also, this is a small thing, but it's something I'm taking home. Brennan is incredible with his onomatopoeias. The bam I immediately knew that that's the corpse of the guy falling off the back of the car. And I've talked about it a lot. Efficiency. But this is one moment where, like, I think that this is, I guess, like, don't be making onomatopoeias every moment of the session. But I really think I could work in more, just sounds like that. Again, onomatopoeias, thinking about like the sounds of things within the game to really quickly communicate flavor and tone. Like he made like a weird squelching sound earlier for one of the spells, and it was very evocative to me. So I guess just quick compliment to Brennan. I think his onomatopoeias are great.
That's now going to be Adine.
I would like to cast Witch Bolt on Johnny Spells, please.
Please go right ahead.
Fuck, it's a nat 1.
Oh.
I'm gonna roll little
It
thing
just
here.
makes him radder. He just gets so rad.
This is so fucking rad.
Oh my god, I'm so wet.
It like gets caught in the wheel and it's like spinning and then it explodes. Shit.
I'm gonna need you to roll 1d12 damage if you'd be so kind.
Oh shit. Sorry, guys. 8.
Your witch bolt flies out of your hand, shoots into the engine of the car, and you see something break and pop and ping around in the engine of the car.
Shit.
And the engine starts making a very weird noise.
You've been a great driver so far, though. I think you can handle it.
Go ahead and make a...
Okay. Now, typically, I'm giving Brennan a bit of benefit of the doubt here, because typically I'm very anti critical fumble, which is essentially what that was. And to be, I suppose, rigorous, the difference between a critical fail and a critical fumble is on a critical fail, which is raw, it's in the rules. If you roll a 1 on an attack roll, whether it's spell or melee or range, whatever, if you roll a 1, it automatically misses. Doesn't matter what your modifier is, doesn't matter what their AC is. Auto misses. That is all it does in the actual rules. A critical fumble is a very popular kind of type or category of home rules, of homebrew rules, where essentially the DM tacks on an extra bad consequence to the nat 1 being rolled. A really common one that I especially hate is like rolling it, like say you're like firing a bow or shooting a gun, maybe in Riz's case, and you nat 1 miss an enemy. Maybe you hit an ally that is behind them, or it somehow ricochets and hits one of your allies, or you drop your gun, or your gun breaks. All of these sorts of things, extra consequences on the nat 1. I broadly dislike these things. I broadly dislike them, especially when they're in combat, because nat 1s already have something very bad that they do. D&D combat is pretty deep. It has a lot of mechanics running around, and automatically missing your attack, regardless of your modifier, is pretty bad already. And especially at low levels, having this sort of critical fumble, especially if it does any like damage to your friends, damage to yourself, if it disarms you, that can be a huge swing in the balance of the encounter in a way that you might not be anticipating necessarily as a DM, and you might not have like the best like mental grasp on, and it just has a 1 in 20 chance of happening, just 5% on every single roll you make. And I think it's not applicable to this specific instance, but it is also a kind of home rule that disproportionately affects different classes, right? The classes are balanced with the fact that a nat 1 in combat means they just miss. They just auto miss. The classes are balanced around that. So if you introduce a new consequence, classes that roll more and thereby have an extra chances, essentially, to get that nat 1 are more negatively impacted by this rule, especially if it's something like, getting disarmed or what have you. So something like a fighter or a warlock with Eldritch Blast. These sorts of classes that are making more attack rolls in a single turn are going to be more consistently affected and more, again, disproportionately affected. So, that all said, I'm not as harsh on, skill check crits, like skill check crit fails, and even the broad concept of like a skill check crit fumble, because skill checks abstract so much within a single dice roll that I think it's okay to add a little bit more granularity on top of it. I'm also a big fan of like degrees of success within the 5e skill check system. I don't do degrees of success within like attack rolls. I'm not going to have, some attack rolls like graze them and maybe do like half damage. No, I don't get that granular because D&D combat is already plenty granular. It has plenty of mechanics to worry about, and that it is all balanced around, as opposed to something like skill checks, which are not so much balanced as they are a way to easily and quickly abstract non-combat challenges and situations. So if you want to add a little bit of extra spice on there with things like, like I said, degrees of success, extra fun 20s, extra low 1s, I think that sort of expansion of the possibilities of a skill check roll can make that out-of-combat experience a little bit more dynamic than just pure binary success and failure. So I'm more, flexible and supportive of it in the out-of-combat skill check area. Now, all of that said, this is maybe the sort of situation where I am the most on board with something that feels like a critical fumble. Like the way that just went down felt very critical fumble-y, of like, the natural 1 and then she's rolling damage and she hits something that wasn't her intended target. That's all very critical fumble. But I also think that you can use essentially the excuse of a critical fumble to evolve something within the scene and the map. Something along the lines of like the car starting to rebel against them. I mean, I don't know what the fuck is going on with the car right now. But whatever is happening is a kind of map update. It's an environmental update. And these things are totally fine and cool and interesting to have in your map. I think that it would be great if the car changed as they drove it. And so when we look at something like critical fumbles, if you want to still have that flavor, but essentially just use it to facilitate an update within the map, like give it an amount of like narrative rationale of like the car doesn't just start randomly acting up after 5 turns or what have you, or after a certain amount of tieflings have been knocked off the board, right? Instead, you use the kind of quasi-random timing of a critical fail in order to essentially act as your trigger for making this map update happen. And even something like rolling damage, maybe that mattered. Maybe it didn't. Maybe he just had to roll damage for the facade of it mattering. Part of the magic trick of DMing. You want to make things feel big and consequential and deep. You don't want to reveal that, like, oh yeah, at a certain point within the car chase, the car just was gonna change. I had that scripted. That was a way that this combat was going to evolve to add kind of a mid-combat interesting narrative beat. Similar to the ooze trying to knock down the door in the cafeteria combat, right? That is probably the reality behind the screen. But tying that evolution, that trigger essentially, to a nat 1 can help maintain that illusion, that grand magic trick. Do not look behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz sort of bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
That's going to be Kristen.
Great. Can I use my staff and shoot power up in the air to try to land onto Johnny's skull?
Sure. What character ability will you be using to do that?
Great. I I think by default that is a amazing way to respond to that sort of assertion from Allie there. With them saying like, I do this. I think that Allie is playing D&D right. I have gone on about how, like, in D&D, you do not say, I would like to insight check or I would like to stealth check. That is not how the baseline of D&D is set up. You just say that you do things, and the DM is the constructor of how that is represented in the mechanics. They might say, make a stealth check. They might say, make a stealth or acrobatics check, whichever's higher. Shit like that. And so I think it is always important for players, and I think Allie did it here, for players to just say, I do this. Now that said, sometimes what the players say that they do may not be possible. And that is on the DM to say so. That is on the DM to either say, no, you can't do that. Or to try and I think that Brennan did this here, redirect that energy. So Allie said that they wanted to do something cool, and honestly something that is not like that out of, that out of reason for a D&D character to do. I think it's reasonable to think that a D&D character like Kristen Appleby's might be able to do something like that if we, pretend that we don't know her, or I shouldn't say her, Kristen's class or what have you. That's something that seems within the repertoire of a D&D character. And so I think it's a really good response from Brennan to just say, what character feature, what character ability are you using to do that? Because Allie might respond with something creative and clever. They might say something to the effect of, can I don't know, I'm trying to think of I don't know cleric abilities that well. But they might say something to the effect of like, oh, can I use my guiding bolt to can I cast it into the ground to give myself like a little bit of a jump? And then Brennan might say, well, the ground in this case is the car. If you want to cast guiding bolt into the car, sure, I'll say it gives you advantage on the athletics check to make that jump. Right? There's like an interesting kind of devil deal sort of negotiation that you can have there with your player to get them the thing that they want. And I've talked about this in terms of character building and character creation before. I'm a big believer in the characters having the things that they want, but also in specificity players need to sacrifice power for specificity. So if they want something that is not within, the standard rules, it's not in a class or subclass or feat or what have you, I want them to have it. I want them to be able to do that ability that they really want to do. But that means that they're going to have to sacrifice in other areas. So I want them to live the class fantasy that they want to live, but I also want the people that are just going by the default rules in the player's handbook to never feel less powerful because they didn't go through like a homebrew process, right? And I think that general logic can apply to moment creativity as well. So I talked about it a little bit with the Friends cantrip of looking at what a player wants to do, something that is non-standard, and saying, okay, how can we get you what you want while potentially having it be maybe less powerful, or less powerful on average, but more powerful in specific situations. That is always what I'm looking at, is this should be a net loss, but it's giving you the specific thing that you want that might be a huge gain in this particular moment. And so something like the example that I gave, not to say that that's like the best example of a possible way to massage this, but, something like damaging the car, their vehicle, in order to accomplish this very cool feat is probably a net loss, right? The vehicle is like the way that they're, weaving in and out of this combat. But if Kristen were to decide, or I should say, if Allie were to decide that trade-off is worth it in that moment, I am more than happy to let them make that trade. Obviously with the approval of, or maybe not approval, but like with the consent of the other players at the table.
Staff and insight with my god.
Insight with your god. You are welcome if you would like to you can make a staff attack. There's actually guys there's like tieflings right outside.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Using it as it's intended, but that's, up to you.
And Brennan, again, redirecting the energy. I said, I'm fine with telling players no. If Brennan had just said, like, no, you can't do that, I think that would have been fine. I think it's even better if you can do it as a DM to redirect the energy, to offer an alternative, even though it's not really an alternative. It's just kind of the standard. Like, Allie did not really give any sort of real or creative or especially poignant, I guess, solutions to how Kristen could accomplish that. And so Bren just says, okay, you're using your staff could do X, Y, and Z. Which, like you said, are the standard things that it can do, but they didn't offer any sort of creative justification there. So I think it's a very fair thing to respond. I think no would have also been fair, but I think that the redirecting energy there is very good.
And you can either attempt to make make an athletics or an acrobatics check to get out of here. I'll let you do it with advantage if you take some damage. So in other words,
love it. Love it. I don't think Brennan has offered something like that yet. I love a devil deal. I used to do this in D&D. I never knew what to call it, and then I learned Blades in the Dark, which has a very explicit mechanic for this sort of thing called a devil deal, where you give the player some type of advantage. They don't have advantage, the proper noun in that game, and I'm not going to explain the particulars, but essentially you can get some sort of advantage on a roll for some manner of cost. And broadly, I call that sort of setup a devil deal, and I think they're fucking awesome. And I love setting up just the basic, like, hey, you can do this. This is what you can do. You can do it like normal. Or you can take this boon and bane. I think it's just really solid, like across the board. A solid DMing heuristic to think about boons and banes in pairs, especially if they're unearned, right? If you, a boon or a bane might be earned separately. So like the car flipping over, we could classify that, abstract that as a bane. That was earned. That was a consequence. She took a risk and she the result of that risk was her earning a bane. And vice versa, you clear out a cave full of troglodytes, and you succeed in the combat, and you earn some treasure at the end. You earned a boon. Now, if you are offering it to the player essentially for free, essentially unearned, offering them in pairs is just a huge thumbs up. I don't even have like a super detailed rationale for this, other than that I have seen it work so consistently, other than my experience. And I personally, just as a DM, regardless of how my players react, I find it so fun. I love offering my players the choice, because I always want to come up with a base case first. Like I fully agree with Brennan offering that base case. They can always do that, and then you slip them a little optional zhuzh. I love the aspect of like giving the players maybe some interesting choices, some risk reward. I think risk reward is one of the baselines of fun drama and conflict within a game, like a TTRPG. Risk reward in real life, it depends on what you're risking. But risk reward within a fantasy game, within a fictional setting, within this escapism, I think risk reward is rarely a bad thing, especially if it's optional. I don't want to make, a 100% assertion, because like I said, I haven't super interrogated this belief. But I think in almost every circumstance, at least all the ones I can think of, an optional risk reward is almost always a net positive. Maybe it slows things down a little bit. The person sits there debating, oh, do I go with the devil deal? Do I go with the base case? But even that, I'm super down with, because, in my opinion, it's an interesting choice. Because again, if the boons and the banes are paired, it's just more specific. It's not necessarily more powerful. It all depends on what they are valuing in that moment. And I love putting my players in that sort of mindset. So, fucking big thumbs up from me. I love a devil deal. Love it.
Right motorcycle in inventory, dude.
Yeah.
What am I gonna say?
Oh.
You have a demonic entity. Does it speak Infernal? Can it teach me Infernal?
If you want to go speak to it, yeah.
I probably know, I know, because I've been trying to learn Infernal ever since I found out I'm a tiefling. So I'm just gonna use the couple of words I know. Hi, how are you?
Young maiden of the Nine Hells, do you come to court my master? Master, let her get on the back. The back. Let her get on the back.
You
shall put her hands around your chest. It'll make her have to feel you.
Oh, how are we getting home?
I would also like to know that.
Are you
How
getting
are we getting home?
dating
What's up with
advice
this
from
guy?
that
What's
bike that
on
you're
his
on?
body?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Cool. Hold on. One.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I got sidetracked.
No complicated evaluation. The bike is awesome. Especially after Fabian made such a big hullabaloo about not being like them, and then it immediately calls him daddy. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Sex
With all the people
But
who
he
haven't
doesn't
had
fuck.
sex with, could have had sex with her. Could have had sex with her.
But didn't want
Could have had sex with him.
He also, in the little black book, you see there's also a little day planner he has there in paper. There is a monthly meeting that he has on the last Friday of every month that is just called tea time.
Oh my god. Wait, I need to steal some of their clothing. Do they have any jackets that have a crest on them or anything like that? Anything that looks like
I mean, T. Last Friday of every month. There's nothing that we know of that occurs on the last Friday of every month. Are there any monthly events that we're aware of? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything to theorize about here, because we already knew that Johnny was somehow connected to the tea. But this is a great quest hook for the party. The party needs to attend tea time. If they don't, I will be shocked.
Doing drugs.
Yeah, that's probably.
That's why we all want to go get ice cream.
We're very safe.
Me and Fabian on the bike.
Real clean cut.
I have on the bike.
I quickly
today.
mend all of our clothes to
You
make
see
us
the
look
bike?
cleaner.
The bike says, no, not the ball. Get the girl. Get the
I'm glad you recognize me as the ball. That feels good.
I hate this ball.
I give my card to the motorcycle.
Please don't solicit my bicycle.
Greetings and salutations, my bike friend.
Master, together we will conquer this world of mortals and send their souls to hell.
Yes, in due time. Bike now to the ice cream shop.
All right, well, that's all we got this week on Dimension 12.
Oh, that was good. That was good. Good shit, Brennan. Leonard Mulligan. Leonard. I don't know. That was a bad joke. That was good. I had a good time. That was definitely still a very interesting combat. But definitely a lot more balanced, and it felt like Brennan had like a good hand on the controls the whole time of like the flow of it back and forth. It seemed awesome. It was really cool. And we'll talk about it more, possibly, during the pre-show, if I end up doing that. Or I guess we will have already talked about it. Either way, thank you for watching. I will be back at some point in the future with Fantasy High Five, and I'm going to go get some dinner and take this dog out because she does not like that I've been recording all day. I'll see you later. Goodbye.